What life was really like in 1930s America. Untold stories of survival and hope. If the 1920s were a decade of lavish parties, vibrant dances, and seemingly endless prosperity, then just a decade later, the Great Depression hit like a prolonged headache, plunging America into one of the most challenging and painful periods in modern history. Today, we're going to turn back time and return to the 1930s to discover what life was really like. This isn't just a dry chapter from a history textbook. It's the authentic story of the daily struggle for survival for millions of Americans, of seemingly insurmountable difficulties. But more importantly, we'll explore how these resilient hearts found hope and small joys amidst the darkness. Join us as we listen to the untold stories of unwavering resilience, creativity, and indomitable community spirit. General context: a time of unprecedented hardship. The 1930s opened with a shocking event, a devastating blow that completely transformed the economic and social landscape of the United States, quickly spreading across the globe. The stock market crash in late October 1929. Around noon on October 24, 1929, dubbed Black Thursday, the Wall Street stock market began to falter. But the peak of this horrific event was October 29, 1929, also known as Black Tuesday, when everything truly collapsed uncontrollably. This event was not merely a financial crisis. It was the trigger that led to the Great Depression, a period that economists and historians describe as the worst and longest economic downturn in all of modern industrial history. The repercussions of Black Tuesday didn't stop at the trading floors. They quickly spread throughout the economy, causing deep and lasting scars on all social strata. Immediately, unemployment rates skyrocketed to unimaginable levels. In 1930, the number reached approximately 4 million people. By 1932, it had surged to 11 million, and at the peak of the crisis in 1933, nearly 13 million people had lost their jobs, pushing the unemployment rate to 25% of the working population. That means 1 out of every 4 working-age adults couldn't find a job. A truly terrifying figure, far exceeding all previous predictions and experiences. Imagine 25% of your relatives and friends suddenly without income, without work, without a clear future. The despair wasn't just evident in the numbers, it was present on every face in every personal story. With no income, thousands of people lost their homes because they couldn't pay their mortgages or rent. The sight of makeshift shantytowns springing up in city dumps, dubbed Hoovervilles, a derogatory reference to President Herbert Hoover, became all too common. These homes were cobbled together from any materials that could be found: scrap metal, discarded wood, eggshells, cardboard, anything that could provide temporary shelter from rain and sun for desperate families. People who had once been breadwinners, who had held important positions in companies, now endured the humiliation and pain of having to search for food in trash cans to feed themselves and their loved ones. They were fathers, husbands, brothers, whose self-respect had been crushed by cruel circumstances. This despair was further highlighted by the fact that a job posting for just 6 positions could attract over 15,000 applicants. Each long line of people waiting for a tiny opportunity was a living testament to the harshness of the times. Even those fortunate enough to keep their jobs were not immune to the effects of the Depression. They faced brutal wage cuts, potentially up to 60%. This meant their living standards plummeted dramatically, making it incredibly difficult to afford even the most basic necessities. To make matters worse, in addition to the economic crisis, the Great Plains and the American Midwest also suffered a devastating natural disaster known as the Dust Bowl. This was a deadly combination of prolonged drought, strong winds, and misguided farming practices, which stripped away fertile topsoil, turning once green fields into vast dust deserts. Dust storms not only destroyed crops but also ravaged homes, caused respiratory problems, and made life in these areas unsustainable. Hundreds of thousands of farming families, already struggling with the economic downturn, now faced a heartbreaking choice: abandon their homes and all their possessions to embark on a tragic migration westward, primarily to California. These migrants were often called Okies, a term used for those from Oklahoma, although they could be from any state in the Dust Bowl region. Their lives on the road, and even upon reaching California, were often filled with hardship, discrimination, and not infrequently opposition from local authorities and native residents. The haunting stories of this migration, of the struggle for survival of these farming families, were vividly and powerfully portrayed through great works of art. John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath, became an icon of this period, telling the story of the Joad family and their journey to find a better life in California. Through Steinbeck's pen, readers could deeply feel the pain, loss, and fragile hope of the migrants. Along with that, Dorothea Lange's haunting photographs, especially the image Migrant Mother, became a timeless symbol of the Great Depression. The photo, depicting Florence Owens Thompson, a young mother with 3 small children, her eyes full of worry but still brimming with resilience, touched the hearts of millions and became a powerful testament to human suffering, yet indomitable spirit during that era. These works are not just art. They are living historical records, helping us better understand the depth of pain and the spirit of resilience in an unprecedented, difficult time. Discrimination against minorities. The Great Depression affected all Americans, but African Americans and other minority groups bore the most severe impacts. While the national average unemployment rate was around 25%, by early 1933, approximately half of all African Americans were unemployed. They faced intense discrimination in hiring and were often the first to be laid off. Many New Deal programs, though well-intentioned, still limited or excluded minorities. For example, some programs did not apply to agricultural and domestic workers, jobs often held by minorities. Racial violence and housing discrimination also made their lives even harder. From the 1930s, some African Americans, who had largely supported the Republican Party since the Civil War, began to support the Democratic Party. The Great Depression not only impacted the United States, but also spread globally. Industrialized nations like Britain and Germany were also heavily affected. International trade decreased by more than 50%, and unemployment rates soared in many places. This paints a grim picture of widespread poverty, unemployment, and compounding natural disasters. It sounds like nothing but hardship and loss, doesn't it? But it was precisely within that harsh picture that the glimmers of resilience, perseverance, and especially human kindness shone brighter and more admirably than ever before. Home life, extraordinary resourcefulness, and thrift. In a country plunged deep into crisis when everything outside seemed to be falling apart, the home became the most important refuge, the last fortress where everyone could weather the storm together. The family was not just a place for emotional connection. It was also an economic unit, where every member had to contribute, working together to find ways to survive. This was a period when family bonds were tested to their limit, and also when they demonstrated their most extraordinary strength. Within the family, the mother, the woman of the house, unexpectedly became the main pillar in managing the household with an unprecedentedly tight budget. Her role was no longer limited to ordinary housework. She became a financial manager, a creative expert in making something out of nothing. With every penny needing careful calculation, she found every way to ensure that all family members still had enough to eat, wear, and stay warm, even though resources were extremely limited. This was a period when women's ingenuity, resourcefulness, and self-sacrifice were pushed to their peak. Daily household chores became exponentially harder. Monday was often designated as laundry day. Imagine women washing a mountain of dirty clothes mostly by hand, on a washboard, sometimes using homemade soap, while water had to be boiled on a wood or coal stove. This work required significant strength and time. Then came Tuesday for ironing. At that time, electric irons weren't common, so many women had to use heavy cast iron irons heated on a coal or wood stove. This was not only strenuous, but also potentially dangerous, requiring caution to avoid burning clothes or causing fires. The smell of smoke, the heat, and the repetitive work became a familiar part of their daily lives. In the context of financial hardship, basic services that we now take for granted became unattainable luxuries. Going to the barber shop or hair salon became too expensive. Instead, people cut each other's hair at home, sometimes with simple, even clumsy styles, but importantly, saving money. Healthcare was also severely affected. Routine dental checkups or even visiting a doctor for minor illnesses had to be carefully considered. People only sought medical help when their illness was too severe to bear, as the cost of medical care was a huge burden for many families. As a result, many diseases were not detected and treated in time, leading to serious health problems later on. A clear example of this involuntary thrift was home births. To save on hospital delivery costs, some women chose to give birth at home with the help of a midwife or family members. Although this could pose medical risks, in a state of financial destitution, it was their only option to reduce the burden of expenses. Clothes and shoes were essential items, but also very expensive. Families had to learn to maximize the use of clothes and shoes, carefully patching them repeatedly until they could no longer be used. The image of clothes covered in patches or worn-out shoes repaired in unexpected ways became a symbol of this era. In harsh circumstances, some families even had to patch torn shoes by cutting rubber pieces from old tires to make soles or patches, a testament to their creativity and ability to make full use of everything around them. Wearing hand-me-down clothes from siblings also became common. This, while perhaps normal today, was for many at the time a great sacrifice of personal pride, as the individual self had to yield to the survival of the entire family. Heating during winter was also a major challenge. Instead of heating the entire house, families focused on heating only one room, usually the living room or kitchen, where everyone could gather to stay warm. They used various fuels from collected firewood, scavenged coal scraps, to even dried corn cobs, anything that could burn to create a little warmth in the cold space. The sight of an entire family huddled around a flickering fire, sharing warmth and stories, became a familiar image, sad yet full of humanity. Finally, to alleviate the financial burden and overcome difficulties together, many families and relatives decided to live together under one roof. This helped them share the burden of living expenses, from rent, utilities, to food and other meager resources. Crowded homes with multiple generations living together were not just shelters, but also symbols of solidarity and mutual support. In a period where isolation could lead to collapse, bonding and sharing became vital, helping millions of American families weather the storm. Do these stories remind you of your grandmother's resourcefulness, your mother's diligence, or family memories huddled together in one warm room during winter? Share your feelings in the comments below. The story of food, meals in hard times, and creativity. In the context of the Great Depression, food became scarce for many, and hunger and malnutrition were widespread problems across the United States. The daily struggle for every bite, for every full meal, became an inseparable part of everyday life. Faced with persistent scarcity, housewives had to employ incredible creativity and ingenuity to ensure their families did not go hungry. Housewives had to learn how to stretch meals. This meant using cheap, easily accessible, and available ingredients to make meals filling enough for everyone, even if they lacked essential nutrients. The primary goal was to fill everyone's stomachs, to give them the energy to continue working and face new challenges each day. Among the iconic dishes of this period, cabbage soup became a national dish. It was popular for very practical reasons. It was cheap and easy to cook in a large pot, enough for the whole family to eat multiple meals. With cabbage as the main ingredient, people could add whatever was available, such as potatoes, carrots, onions, and a little bone or meat scraps if they were lucky enough to find any. A hot bowl of cabbage soup, though simple, held great significance for warmth and survival during difficult days. Besides cabbage soup, casseroles or one-pot meals also became extremely popular. These dishes were often made from basic ingredients like beans, potatoes, pasta, and a little meat, if available, creating a filling and easy-to-prepare meal. Typical examples included chili, meat and bean stew, or macaroni and cheese, though the cheese might be cheap or extended with other ingredients. These were dishes that maximized ingredients and provided necessary energy. Bread was a staple food, essential for every meal, often eaten with potatoes and beans. Canned foods were also very popular due to their convenience and long shelf life. In more desperate cases, some even hunted wild animals for meat, although this carried many risks and wasn't always successful. In an effort to secure food sources, growing vegetables in home gardens was no longer a hobby but an extremely important task. Every empty plot of land was utilized to grow essential vegetables and root crops, providing families with fresh food. Not just home gardens, in some towns, local governments or organizations even transformed unused vacant lots into thrift community gardens. Here, people worked together, sharing labor and harvest, fostering a strong community spirit. A prime example was the Community Garden Program in Detroit, which once provided food for about 20,000 people, an impressive number that demonstrates the effectiveness of this model. Old cookbooks from the Great Depression era are a treasure trove that demonstrates the extraordinary creativity and ability to fully utilize every ingredient by housewives. There were recipes for cookies made only from lard, sugar, and flour without butter, eggs, or milk, ingredients that were luxuries at the time. Or butterbean pickles, which might sound strange but were a unique way to prepare cucumbers, surprisingly utilizing what was available. Pie crusts made from ground cornmeal scraps were also a clever example of not wasting anything. Americans also learned to use every edible part of packaged foods. For example, they would use the liquid from canned beans to cook other dishes instead of discarding it, as would be typical. This creativity not only helped them survive, but also showed a spirit of not surrendering to adversity. However, among all the stories about food, perhaps the most haunting is the story of families having to eat in shifts to ensure everyone had food, albeit in very limited quantities. Imagine the scene. Some family members eating on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, while others ate on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and the whole family could only eat together on Sunday. This not only speaks of extreme deprivation, but also demonstrates the boundless love and sacrifice of parents who were willing to go without, to endure hunger so their children could have enough to eat. It was a heartbreaking but deeply moving reality of human compassion. Even in the darkest of times, community spirit was the fire that warmed people's hearts. Communal meals, often called potlucks, became very popular. These meals were typically organized by churches, charities, or neighbors, where each family contributed a dish they could make for everyone to share. This was not only a place to fill hungry stomachs, but also where people could find comfort, share their burdens, and strengthen their faith in the future, proving the power of solidarity in adversity. Is there any dish from your grandparents' time that you still cherish and preserve today? Share its recipe or story. Entertainment and spirit, light in the darkness. When life revolved solely around having enough to eat, wear, and a place to live, entertainment suddenly became something too distant, too luxurious. In the 1930s, as millions struggled with unemployment and poverty, spending money on non-essential activities seemed unimaginable. As a result, more than a third of movie theaters across the United States were forced to close due to a lack of audiences. Places that were once symbols of glamour now stood silent and deserted. However, people always need an escape, a glimmer of light in the darkness to maintain their spirits. When they couldn't go to movie theaters, people turned to a much more popular and accessible form of entertainment: the radio. The old radio wasn't just an electronic device. It became the center of many homes, the primary source of entertainment, broadcasting continuously throughout the day. Gathering around the radio became a daily ritual, bringing connection and precious moments of oblivion. During the day, housewives often listened to soap operas, long-running stories about love, family, and daily life, often sponsored by soap companies. These stories were not just entertainment, but also a way for them to escape the harsh reality, immersing themselves in the lives of others. After school, the radio served children with thrilling action and adventure programs, stimulating their imaginations in a world lacking material possessions. But the most sacred and anticipated moment of the day was the evening, when the whole family gathered around the radio to listen to news, comedy shows, or live musical performances. This was the only time of day when everyone could set aside their worries, laugh together, dream together, and feel the family connection. The voices of the broadcasters, the music from the radio, became an indispensable part of the memories of many generations of Americans. If not listening to the radio, families could choose other forms of home entertainment. Board games became very popular. These games not only brought laughter but also encouraged interaction among family members, strengthening relationships during long days of hardship. The game Sorry was released in 1934 and quickly gained popularity due to its simple rules and high entertainment value. But the most successful and iconic was Monopoly. Officially released in 1935, Monopoly became a sensation. The game allowed players to freely buy, sell, build properties, own hotels, and famous streets with huge sums of money, things they could only dream of in real life. Monopoly was not just a game, it was a form of escapism, a way for people to temporarily experience the feeling of wealth and power, which they completely lacked in their real lives. Beyond home entertainment, an outdoor entertainment phenomenon also boomed: mini-golf. This sport became a real craze, with over 30,000 mini-golf courses springing up across the country. The main reason for its popularity was the cost, only 25 to 50 cents per game, very affordable for many workers. Mini-golf didn't require many skills or expensive attire, was highly entertaining, and was an activity that could be enjoyed with family or friends, creating rare moments of fun and relaxation. It provided a public entertainment space where people could socialize and temporarily forget the burdens of life. No matter how difficult life became, Americans in the 1930s always found ways to entertain themselves, to temporarily forget their worries, find small smiles, and most importantly, have the opportunity to gather with family and share happy moments together. These simple forms of entertainment not only helped them relieve stress but also strengthened relationships, boosted optimism, and were an invaluable source of spiritual encouragement for them to continue fighting for a better future. We learn from them that, even in the face of extreme adversity, the human spirit always finds a way to live, to hope, and to find joy. For you, what from the 1930s do you think we can still learn from today to strengthen our spirit and community bonds? Government and community support, the New Deal's response. The scale of the Great Depression was too vast, far exceeding the capacity of private charities or local governments to respond effectively. America needed large-scale intervention from the federal government, and that came under the leadership of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Under the skillful leadership of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a series of programs and policies were enacted, collectively known as the New Deal. This was a significant historical turning point, marking the birth of the American welfare state. With the concept of the government being responsible for providing a basic social safety net for its citizens, the New Deal was not just an economic recovery plan, it was a revolution in the role of government in people's lives. The New Deal aimed at three main goals: relief for the needy, recovery for the national economy, and reform of the financial and social systems to prevent a similar crisis in the future. Many key programs were implemented during the New Deal era, each playing an important role in revitalizing the nation. Emergency Banking Act, 1933. This was one of Roosevelt's first and most crucial actions. It aimed to stabilize the banking system by providing federal support to banks at risk of failure. This act also removed the gold standard, allowing the government to circulate more paper money, thereby increasing liquidity and stimulating the economy. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. Established to insure bank deposits up to $2,500. This restored public confidence in the banking system, encouraging people to deposit money back into banks instead of hoarding cash at home. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Created to oversee stock transactions, preventing the fraudulent and manipulative market practices that contributed to the 1929 crash. Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC. An extremely successful program that employed young men aged 18 to 25 in conservation work, such as planting trees, erosion control, and forest protection. Approximately 2 million young men participated in this program, not only providing them with jobs and income, but also contributing to the protection of the nation's natural resources. Federal Emergency Relief Administration, FERA, provided direct aid to the unemployed and struggling, including food and other necessities. Sometimes, FERA also subsidized salaries for teachers and local administrative staff, helping to maintain important public services. Agricultural Adjustment Act, AAA, aimed to stabilize agricultural prices by paying farmers to reduce crop acreage. Although controversial for encouraging reduced production while many were hungry, it helped increase farmers' incomes and stabilize the agricultural market. Works Progress Administration, WPA, became the nation's largest employer, providing jobs for millions of unemployed people in public works projects such as building roads, bridges, schools, and airports. The WPA also had projects supporting artists, writers, and musicians, helping to preserve and develop American culture. Social Security Act, 1935. One of the most groundbreaking achievements, it created a state-managed welfare system, including benefits for the disabled, the poor, and the unemployed, along with a national retirement insurance system. This is the foundation for America's modern social security system. In addition, other programs such as the PWA, providing jobs for skilled construction workers, the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, developing the Tennessee River Valley with hydroelectric dams and flood control, bringing electricity and flood control to a vast area, and the Rural Electrification Administration, REA, bringing electricity to rural areas, changing the lives of millions, also contributed significantly to the recovery effort. Before the Great Depression, receiving government aid was often stigmatized, seen as shameful, a sign of personal failure. However, in the context of millions losing everything, with no other way out, this attitude gradually changed. Government aid was no longer a source of shame, but became an essential need, a lifeline for people drowning in despair. Although the New Deal brought modest economic improvements and created a more robust social foundation, true economic recovery was only completed when World War II broke out in 1939. Massive spending on the war effort created jobs and stimulated the economy powerfully. Millions of unemployed young men were mobilized into the military, and many women joined the workforce to produce war goods, pulling America out of stagnation. To better understand the struggle of workers during this period, let's look at the story of letter carriers. In the early days of the Great Depression, the job of a letter carrier, with an average salary of $2,064 per year, was considered enviable in a nation with 13 million unemployed. They seemed much safer than others, and however, they were still significantly affected by harsh policies. President Hoover's Economy Act of 1932 cut their wages by 8 1/3%. By March 1933, President Roosevelt replaced this with a straight 15% pay cut, bringing their wages back to 1916 levels. This was a huge shock for people trying to maintain their livelihoods. Substitute carriers were the most severely impacted. They earned only 50 to 65 cents per hour, sometimes just $6 per week. And the government's prohibition on filling vacant positions severely affected their livelihoods, pushing them into extremely difficult situations. In this context, the National Association of Letter Carriers, NALC, persistently lobbied for wage restoration and aid for substitute carriers. They argued that wage cuts did not significantly help balance the national budget, and that the government was acting insincerely and inconsistently by encouraging industry to raise wages while cutting its own employees' pay. This was an arduous struggle, but they did not give up. And the struggle succeeded. The wages of all government employees were fully restored by April 1935. Afterward, NALC continued strong campaigns for pay raises, using radio broadcasts and public appeals to garner public support, emphasizing the importance of postal service and their dedication. Thanks to the dynamic leadership of William C. Daugherty, letter carriers won a $300 per year wartime bonus in 1943, and their first permanent pay raise in 20 years in July 1945. By May 1946, they received an additional $400 per year. And by October 1949, the goal of balancing pay for all city letter carriers, regardless of community size, was achieved. The story of letter carriers is a powerful testament to the strength of unity and fighting for rights, even in the most difficult times. Amidst the harsh realities of the Great Depression, which image or story left the strongest impression on you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The 1930s truly represent a turbulent chapter in American history. Despite facing extreme poverty and devastating natural disasters, the resilient spirit of Americans during this period shone brighter than ever. They did not let hardships extinguish hope or weaken their will, but rather transformed them into a powerful motivation to unite, to create, and to collectively build a stronger foundation for the future. Their story of struggles, sacrifices, and even small joys amidst the darkness is a powerful reminder of core values that never change. The value of honest labor, the meaning of family as the last fortress, and the enduring strength of community. We hope this video has provided you with deep insights and emotional perspectives on a memorable historical period. Thank you for watching and joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Back to Yesterday channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos.